Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 59. Oh, we're almost to the big 6-0 of Technically Trek. I am your host, Dave Prime. Over there is Captain Katie, our ditzy wish. How's it going, my dear?
Um, I'm alive, if that counts. Yeah,
It counts. I say
that's fine.
I survived another week of kickball. Say we didn't win, but we didn't lose either yesterday. We tied.
Well, that is good. But then God, if I can even speak tonight. But did you enjoy it? That's the most important thing.
I did. I didn't get on base. I did kick the ball a couple of times. I didn't have a field position, but we're going to mix it up because we got a double header on Star Wars Day, May the 4th. I
Oh.
might wear my comm badge at that game just to say ha ha.
Oh, please and
As-
take photos. Please take photos.
Oh, and
I would love
I
to see
got it,
everybody's faces turning up on Star Wars Day with a Starfleet comm badge. That is just golden.
and it's kind of a very pukey yellow color for for our our team's color, but yeah, it is what it is. But yeah, so I forget what I was going to say. Apologies for the delay. We ergo I was running into some technical issues at the last minute. The computer decided to take forever to reboot, so I hit the God button. I just held the power button for about a minute before it rebooted again, and it came up just fine. But I gotta learn to get this shit in a row before 10 minutes before the episode. But I did have to shave, so I was getting a little
Honestly,
on the scruffy side.
Honestly, I thought I was going to have to host the show with no credits, no nothing, just pop up on screen saying, "Hi, this is going to be a really awful show because we've got no credits. I don't know how to work anything." So, I actually thought it was going to come to that, and I was just like, "Oh God,
Yeah,
what the hell is
and,
going on?"
yeah, and Tyson called me saying, "Yeah, there's no link on the YouTube." It's like, oh fudge! I thought I put that on there, but I guess I didn't. So on that, but yeah, I say that once again, don't have the any what do they call them? Notes, the script. I'm saying don't have anything written up for that just yet, but and I was gonna do a really cool little blurb for our partner Debbie. I got a fancy new bottle over the weekend,
Oh, I
and
like that.
he's even got little doggy ears on his hoodie. I just noticed that
Oh,
today.
I love that. I actually want that hoodie.
Yeah, it's a cute hoodie. I'd be totally down for that. I think they probably do have them. They just out of stock. But W is an energy drink that you can get deals on by going to w.gg. You get 10% off the code or 10% off your order when you use the code TechTrek, TEKTREK. And it's saying I got the mystery flavor. I'm still trying to figure out what the flavor is. I think it's berry. It's some sort of berry. I'm not sure what, but it's delicious. I like it. It gives you that focus and that energy that you need to make it through a podcast, or if you're going on a 3-4 hour gaming binge, W is a great thing to have. So I highly recommend it. So
So I was going to say,
w.gg,
I would love. Sorry, go on.
I say w.gg and enter the code TechTrek and 10% off your order. The same, but we're going to wrap up. What were you going to say before we go into everything?
No, I was just gonna say I would say I would love to try it, but I don't think I need any more energy running through my system because I don't sleep enough as it is.
Mm,
Um, Although knowing my luck, it'd
nope.
probably send me to sleep. I should try it one day.
Well, say, I mean, years ago when I was on the sports editor for my high school paper, we were pounding the Mountain Dew like there was no tomorrow because we had a Pepsi machine in the cafeteria at the school, and of course they were on at night. So for a while I became kind of immune to caffeine. See, I could probably drink 6 of these and
Yeah,
still be in bed by 9 o'clock, but
I
I'm going to be
probably couldn't.
busy at 9 o'clock tonight, so that's why my AA meeting is going to be wrapping up at that time. So, but I'm still going to get to bed, hopefully at a decent hour tonight.
Very hopefully.
But yeah, we are going to be wrapping up our Borg month with the Enterprise episode Regeneration. Rewatching this today, I forgot actually how good it was. I mean, there's a lot of subtle nods. What did I do in my notepad? Yeah. And saying one thing I did make a note right off the bat was the Brian Tyler who did the score for this episode. I mean, he took a lot of cues from Goldsmith from Star Trek First Contact, which I think was great, but then he put his own little spin to it and made it pretty scary. I mean, credit to Ron Jones who started it all with the Borg music and all that, but saying Goldsmith really hit the nail on the head, but Tyler he did a damn good job with it, I think. So props to him on that. But there is like a lot
I
of
really
little
liked
other
the music for this episode actually. Nothing can beat the opening soundtrack. I
mm,
still maintain that. But you know, I actually forgot how good this episode was as well. I remember when I first watched it, which was only about a year or two ago, when it was
mhm.
official DC homework. When I first watched it, I thought, really, they're going to go there? Because as soon as I saw the title Regeneration, I'm just like, this has got to be a Borg episode. But how can that be? And then when I realized what was happening, I'm just like, oh, wow, they're tying in First Contact.
Mhm.
And I didn't expect good things from it. I will be honest, I didn't. But the more the episode progressed, the more I moved closer to my screen because I was just like, ooh, what's going to happen now? And yeah, it was really good. Um, and one thing that I, one thing I love, but also one thing that I'm unsure about.
I thought that was feedback from you for a second there.
No,
Is your
it's
mom
a
being a little
lady.
noisy?
Hmm. It's not me. My mother's asleep. And my mother's not American. But I don't know who that was. But what was I going to say? Yeah, the one thing that I was really glad of, but also I'm still a little unsure about, is when they get the communication from the Borg. All they say is, "You will be assimilated. Resistance is futile." Now, that for me, it just seemed a little too. We are not going to mention their name. And it seemed a little bit obvious that they were forcing the issue of not mentioning their name, because when the Borg communicate with people, the first thing that they say is, "We are the
We are
Borg."
the Borg.
So I
I
think
just
that it would have been
say
a
I
little
just
bit
think
more believable. But no, I think it'd have been a little bit more believable if the first bit of the message was garbled and then it says, "You will be assimilated. Resistance is futile." I think that would have been a little bit more in keeping with standard Borg greetings if it was a little bit garbled at the beginning, so you couldn't quite understand it or make it out, and then obviously the rest of their usual spiel. But other than that, I really liked the episode.
yeah, so my thought to that point in particular is that when Hoshi said that they were hailing, they probably said we are the Borg before she hit the button. So they probably said we are the Borg. You will
Yeah.
be then when she picked it up, say you will be assimilated. It's kind of like when those automated calls call you
Mm,
and you send it the voicemail, it starts blip 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 as soon as
yeah.
the voicemail picks up, and then you only get half of the message.
Yeah, I would like to think that's what happened. That is what we can tell our viewers. That's what happened, people. We don't know, but that's what we're saying.
Yeah, but
But yeah,
I
like I
made a
say,
note
other
of
than
it.
that, that I thought was a little bit, yeah, I really loved
Mm.
it.
Yeah, and it's like you're kind of touch base on it. It's the perfect example of a bootstrap bootstrap paradox. where see these droids were able to succeed, where the Borg that traveled back in time failed is actually making contact with the collective in the Delta Quadrant, which this is the first time, and we're almost at the end of the second season of Enterprise, and they actually mention a quadrant by name for the first time. But we're not just gabbing back and forth. I am going to bring Travis and Tyson in on the chat. How's it going, guys?
Great. How you doing? Just
Good.
want to
How
make
about
sure
yourself?
that
Hello, this-
I'm not promoting any other shows tonight. Just
Which that's coming back here not in a week, I want to say.
I
Maybe.
hope so. That'd be nice.
Yeah.
Be nice to have a job again.
A non-paying job.
Did you guys see the hoodie my guy on my Tumblr's wearing? Got little doggy
Anime
ears.
guys are always hotter on anime than they are in real life.
Oh, but look at the hoodie. He's got little doggy ears on it.
I know he's
Really?
cute. He's got like looks like some dreads going on there, and
A little bit, yeah, or some
I mean,
sort.
anime characters always look good until they film like a live version, and then oh my god, he looks so much hotter as an anime, and then you get this live person, and it's somebody
Well,
ugly.
I could really go into
that
something
seems to
I
be-
won't.
What's that, Katie?
I could really go into something there with Tyson, but I won't because it'll completely go off topic of the episode, and I really don't want to go there because it's a question I ask a lot of people when they say stuff like that. So I'm just going to take a step back from that.
Yeah, let's see.
I just
We got.
Travis is looking particularly fluorescent today. I really love the shirt.
Well, thank you. This was from my one of my aunts. She visited Las
Aw.
Vegas many years ago.
I love that T-shirt. I love the colors.
I can attest to the fact that Las Vegas is very neon-y.
But one thing I was reading about. One thing I was reading about this episode today was that a lot of the debris in the Arctic, which, by the way, kudos on the jacket, but for being in a sub-zero, like blizzard-like conditions, no face protection for the skin whatsoever.
Yeah. The illusion that they had that they was in the Arctic, I was like, when I first seen this episode, I was like, okay, I see the fake snow. And then, no cover, because we all know when you see people in the Arctic, not everybody, I have seen people like up that's in Alaska or Canada and stuff. It just depends on what part. But if you go on further up north and stuff, and on the glaciers and stuff like that, you will want to have like facial protection, like goggles and stuff. Especially the episode portrayed where the wind was blowing and stuff. I was like, yeah, y'all could have did a better job. Of course, I know budget and stuff. This was supposed to be, the appearance of, of the Arctic and stuff. But it just was like, I kind of overlooked that and everything. But one thing I wanted to say too about the opening, did y'all notice that it took at least almost 11 minutes before we got to the Enterprise?
10 and a half to be exact.
It was it was pretty interesting to see that everything took place on Earth before we seen Enterprise. And I was like, you know what? I kind of like that storyline, in the sense that, you was like that you felt like what's going to happen. Then you realize when not just the title alone of the episode, but then when they started when they when they just wiped away the fake snow and you seen the Borg. It's like, so two Borg, from what I seen in this episode, remember in this episode, two Borg survive, the destruction of their ship and stuff.
Of the sphere in it, first contact, yep.
Oh yeah. And I was just thinking, wow. After almost 100
Katie's like,
no.
What?
No, it wasn't just the two of them that they salvaged. It was only two of them that they kept there, because if Do you know when the Arctic person worker said to the other one that they should move on to module 3 with the others? They said we should move on to module 3 with the others.
Mm.
And he said, no, we'll keep them here because something about freezing them would probably harm
Yeah, I
them.
remember that. I
So
remember that
no,
part.
it was only the two of them that they basically
Bought out.
took out of storage for study, so to speak.
That's, that begs the question about that. You know, these nanoprobes, because it goes to me, it goes to the heart of the nanoprobe. The nanoprobes themselves reactivated the drones, and that's where it starts to pick up. Where it's like, oh my goodness, if they're starting to, repair, not just the cybernetic part, the mechanical part, but the flesh and stuff and everything. And then you start looking at, I'm just saying this, it's not no crazy wild conspiracy and everything else. You know, a Borg drone, a person, say one of us gets assimilated. We seen Picard get assimilated. He was still alive. Everybody, you alive when you get assimilated. When you die, you die. Not saying that we have a soul or anything and stuff and everything. Once you die, you die. But yet these that these beings was literally reanimated like zombies.
I have a theory.
And it was crazy to see that, it's like after almost 100 years, they was up walking, they were walking, moving around and stuff and everything else, and it gives you a no perspective of saying, wow, if they say that they can control not just your, mechanical and your biological stuff like that, you know, does that mean that Borgs don't have a soul?
I was thinking of that too. I presumably, the Borg that we find in the Antarctic are the ones from the sphere that exploded back in time, right? The ones that
Yes.
Yes.
Picard went into the time stream and fought. Now, Borg existed on the sphere and on the Enterprise. No, as far as I know, none of the Borg beamed down to the planet. Um, that said, and this is an assumption on my part. The Borg that we find in the Arctic was on the sphere that exploded. Maybe remnants from the sphere containing Borg drones somehow made it through the atmosphere without burning up, crashed without any kind of parachute. So we're talking about terminal velocity smacking the Earth. And now, if an airplane falls out of the sky and crashes on the ground and blows up, it people when they're trying to put together wreckage usually don't find, and this is going to be gross, but body parts bigger than a few inches because you've been discorporated. Let's call it that way. You've been discorporated. Little bits of you are just all over the place. Somehow, they managed to survive the explosion, the reentry, the crash, and if it was in the Arctic or Antarctic, and I forget which one it is, we're talking about
Arctic.
Arctic. So we're talking about ice pack, which is like hitting cement, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and their bodies are completely intact,
And Flash
uh,
Frozen.
completely intact, flash frozen. And to Travis's point, we've seen Borg die all the time. There was even the episode with Hugh where we meet Hugh, where he requires immediate medical attention or he'll die. Um, and that's modern Borg. These Borg somehow survived all of that, didn't lose so much as a fingernail, and then um, reanimate.
Mm-hmm.
Borgs don't reanimate. They've never reanimated before. How did these Borgs?
Yes, they
But
have.
well, then
In
why
in
why?
Voyager,
I have a theory.
Okay,
Now, I've seen a fictional TV series before where something has been found in the ice, and this has scientific premise as well. It's where they got the idea from. an episode of the X-Files. Is it the X-Files? Or was it Relic Hunter? It was one of them. They unearthed something from the Arctic, and it was perfectly preserved in the ice. And when they melted it, they all got hit by a virus. Somehow that virus had survived the deep freeze. But also, if you look to Voyager, the episode where those 3X drones come looking for Seven, their sphere or ship or whatever it was crashed on a planet, and they were the only 4 survivors, but they survived intact. Now, if you think about it, think about the type of alloy that the Borg are made of. They're nanoprobes, but also they have bodily shielding as well. And fair enough, the sphere was blown up by 4, was it? Quantum torpedoes? And there wasn't much wreckage left. In all honesty, and if there was, it had been in little bits. But if I remember rightly, they did mention something about. Now, I could be wrong. I could be wrong, but I do vaguely remember something about them saying pieces of these aliens. So obviously they found body parts as well, and they may have found other drones intact. But if you take everything into account and the fact that their nanotechnology is highly sophisticated, like even beyond 24th century Starfleet, in all honesty, to some degree, it it would have helped to preserve them. And the Borg will do whatever they deem necessary to survive. And if it came to a point that, like, where the sphere was blown up, just a theory, like I say, just a theory, they're like personal shielding. I don't know exactly what it's called, but they're like personal bodily shielding. Could have protected him. You know, it could have done, protect him from a phaser blast, but also landing in the Arctic in a deep freeze, coupled with the technology that they carry and the nanoprobes could have helped to sustain their bodily functions and sent them into kind of like a deep hibernation. But they needed that initial like thawing out and possibly something else, I'm not sure, to be able to basically get a bit of a jump start out of the hibernation.
Well, here's let me stop you there for a second. We have seen Borg without body armor or without a spacesuit being outside the Enterprise in space, presumably their nanotechnology and their personal shielding.
Yeah.
Okay, so in space, in shadowed areas, it gets down to -200-300 degrees Celsius, far colder than it is on Earth. In a deep freeze like that. A deep freeze, you might be 50 degrees below zero. But these Borg can walk around and be just fine in 200 degrees below zero. So I don't think they would have needed to thaw out first. I would think that the cold is something that they're adapted to. And again,
well, no, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that because of the cold and also because of the winds in the Arctic, the surface area is at different levels constantly. And it's something that I looked into after watching this episode the first time, because I found it quite far-fetched that they would be so close to the surface. But the going theory about things buried in the Arctic is that it was proposed that if something crashed there and nobody knew about it, it could be buried for a few hundred years, but because of all the winds up there, and coupled with a little bit of global warming and a lot of different factors, it could actually unbury itself after a few hundred years. So when this Borg sphere crashed, they could have been buried many feet below the ground, and they may have not been able to get out. So the nanotechnology may have put them into a form of hibernation.
Yeah, but here's what would have to go wrong for all of this to happen. One, they survive the initial quantum torpedo explosion, which, at least on screen, didn't show any large bits that would have housed, like, where a group of people could have possibly survived. But let's suspend disbelief on that for a second. And it, let's say that
Yes,
at least
Dave.
these kids did survive. Then it had to survive reentry, which, almost very few things survive that, even very strong titanium metals. But let's say they did that. Then you have to consider the impact, the speed at which they were impacted, and biology surviving such an impact. Then we also have to believe that the Enterprise, before it left, didn't scan for any small debris. Starfleet has a
Yes.
very big
Yes.
policy about not leaving technology behind, right? You would
You.
think that they would scan for something that wouldn't be, on Earth. Like, this particular alloy shouldn't exist at this time, and we know Borg used this particular alloy, so we're going to scan for technology that shouldn't be here before we leave. So there, I mean, you have to suspend all of that to believe, that this happened.
Worf shot, or Picard shot, and he flew off the deflector dish. He went floating in space. You think they would have to recover him because the Vulcans was coming into the system, and if they would have scanned, they would have found that board.
Right.
They
You
cleaned
have
up the
to
mess.
exactly. You really have to, account for all these things that would have had to go wrong, or, well, would have to go right in favor of the Borg, like, even if they survived all that. And then, I mean, we can go on about, well, maybe they had shields, maybe the shields protected them, their nanites protected them, maybe because it was at a pole, and we know that the Enterprise has issues with magnetic fields around the poles, maybe it couldn't scan it, didn't see it. But I mean, we have to make like 20 different excuses before we can believe that this happened. And at a point, one or two of those things could go wrong, but like 20, they survived this. I mean, it just, it gets to a point where it was a great fun story. I'm not going to deny. I love the episode. I think it's a fun episode.
Oh
And
yeah.
I like
Oh
how they
yeah.
tied it to the movie. I think that's fun too. But it's just,
Absolutely.
so much had to go wrong for this to happen. And I just,
Well,
it's
and there's actually a Star Trek Nemesis reference of sorts in this episode as well. Say the debris field that's in the Arctic, parts of it's from the wreckage of the saucer from Nemesis when Picard
Hmm.
ordered Troy to ram the Enterprise into the Scimitar.
it
Saying so
is.
it's hard to catch, but it was on IMDb. Just say that there's like some of the debris is from the crash saucer section from Nemesis.
You know, not to get jumping ahead. Also, too, um, when Archer was doing some research in the computer database, and he came across Zephyr Cochrane's speech at Princeton.
Mm.
Uh, when the camera panned and it was like pointing towards that particular scene where he was looking at, paused it for a moment, and I was able to make out, you know, Zephyr Cochrane's speech and stuff. And it was so pretty interesting to see that he actually was talking about his first what really happened during his first you know um the
Event of
first
First
warp
Contact.
cast and stuff.
Mhm.
And it was funny. It was funny because people just they dismissed him because as as Paul pointed out, he was a drunk, and he was known to make up things and stuff and everything. But yet, that right there tied it back into uh, First Contact, and
Mhm.
also the whole thing too. And I said this before on a couple of shows before. This where the Dolly paradox, not the Dolly paradox, the Pogo paradox come into play.
Uh,
to prevent an event, it actually triggers the event. You
Yeah.
know, it's like it's like they actually so they kind of made it like humans were responsible for the Borg knowing about them long before you know others knew about the Borg. They didn't say the Borg and stuff like that, but it made this thing where humans came in contact with the Borg before they should have came in contact with it.
Yeah, so kudos on the writing staff of making the illusion without being outright, because we as a viewer know everything about it, but the characters know nothing about it.
Well, here's another thought. When when they officially meet the Borg in Star Trek: The Next Generation in the episode with the Q,
Mhm.
that's when humans officially meet the Borg, and the Borg officially recognize humanity and then pursue humanity. And yet,
System
during that very
J25.
first episode, um, um, uh, Guinan was consulted, and she talked about her home being destroyed by the Borg and who they were. You know, I guess my first thought to, if I were Picard would be like, you've been on my ship for 3 years and you didn't bother to bring up this kind of really destructive alien that is obviously close enough to our space because, if you made it here, they could make it here, right? Alorians, your planet was destroyed by the Borg, you know, you made it and um I I just feel like, you could have said something earlier and we could have been warned.
Mm,
Listen, you
but
remember in the episode in the first season of Next Generation, do you remember the episode?
neutral
Was
zone.
it the neutral zone? The neutral zone. They discovered that both the Romulan and Federation basically were gone, and they could not. They didn't ever explain that until second season because Data said because he basically said, you know, when he scanned the planets that was in scanning range, he basically said, this is it has the same pattern as we saw in that appeared in the neutral zone, and that just like, oh my goodness. So the Borg actually were in, it seemed like they came in for like a little test run or did something before they sent that first cube and stuff.
And you
You
remember
know,
the Romulans when they said, when we saw the level of destruction, we knew it couldn't be you. What a
Yeah.
exactly,
slap in the
exactly.
face.
Ding.
Oh goodness.
But Tyson, you brought up a good point with Guinan not talking to Picard about the Borg or anything. But in the episode Time's Arrow, is saying when Picard disappeared, say Riker, she couldn't tell Riker anything about it. She couldn't tell Picard anything about it. But all she says is, if you don't go on this mission, we'll never meet. So she knew with her I can't her knowledge
What'd you
Intuition.
about
say?
time and the wibbly wobbly, all that stuff, she knows that you can't divulge too much information. It's like the Elorian version of the Prime Directive.
Well, they were
Mhm.
Uh,
refugees, their world destroyed. I'm sure the Federation would have asked what happened.
hey, Katie had her hand up.
Yes, go ahead.
One question that I failed to ask when we covered the movie First Contact, it reminded me when Travis mentions Ephraim Cochrane's speech at Princeton, telling the true events of First Contact.
Hmm.
Which came first? Zephram Cochrane giving his speech or Riker telling him about it in the cockpit of the Phoenix? Because Riker said, he quoted a speech from Zephram Cochrane saying, "You don't have to be a great man, just be a man and let
Let
history
history.
take its course." Now, which came first? Did Zephram Cochrane say it first? Or did Riker say it first and Zephram Cochrane stole it? It's kind of like the chicken and the egg thing there. It's
Was it
one question that I failed to ask.
I know you're not a fan of the original series, but Zephram Cochrane appears in the original series, and he's on a planet where his ship crashed, and this kind of calamarine type entity was taking care of him. A badly injured doctor who was being transported on a shuttle back to the Enterprise crash lands on this planet, and she is close to death, and this entity and her merge to become a single entity, and the woman is fine. And Zephram Cochrane, says, please don't tell anybody I'm here. And they Enterprise leaves, and they live, Zephram Cochrane and this woman. Now, Zephram Cochrane states that I was, a great deal older when I arrived here, and this planet or her or whatever, kind of restored his youth. But that's not how the history of Zephram Cochrane is told in the Next Generation. Like, he's actually there, he lives, he dies. So I feel like there's some, it doesn't jive with the
It's
original.
continuity.
Yeah, there's some
Yes.
continuity
Yes.
issues with Zephram Cochrane.
Hmm.
You see, as far as now, I could be wrong, like very, very wrong, but because I've blocked the original series out for damn good reason, but obviously Zephram. I mean, I don't know how old Zephram Cochrane was when First Contact happened, but it was at least middle aged, and it was 2063, and this episode, Regeneration, happened 90 years later, like minus a month. And so obviously, by the time the NX-01 had its maiden voyage, Zephram Cochrane was dead. So you've just mentioned that it was in TOS.
Yes.
Again, that does not work because TOS is supposed to be a little tiny bit after Enterprise. Because Enterprise is supposed to be chronologically, Enterprise comes first in the timeline because that's only 90 years after First Contact. And all throughout, disregarding TOS, all throughout, the rest of Trek, First Contact has always been April 5th, 2063. And so how would Zephram Cochrane be in TOS?
Because the Calamarine cloud thing, because Tyson is saying that he mentioned that he was a great deal older when he arrived at that planet, but this cloud thing made him young again. He had essentially made him immortal.
Yeah.
Until the end of the
Right.
episode when he and the cloud thing kind of merged together, he's going to start aging normally again from that point forward. But yeah, so he was immortal for a little while in that episode, so that's how it works.
TOS took place in the year 2265, between 2265 and 2269.
So that's what, 200 years after First Contact?
Roughly. Mm-hmm.
Like 202 years, something like that. But my question is,
if you'll Dave, share what I just put in here so people can see it. There you go. There's Zephram Cochrane from the original series and Zephram Cochrane from First Contact.
hold on, I've got questions here. The Zephram Cochrane from TOS, why does he look like some out of the Thunderbirds?
Because it was the 60s when it was.
He does. Like they were little marionette puppets, but he does kind of look like that,
I'm
right?
looking for the strings. I'm looking for the strings because he looks like something out of the original Thunderbirds.
Oh my
A little
God!
bit, yeah.
I recently watched the Thunderbirds series, which is ridiculous. But there's these little marionette puppets that are you know, uh, that are the main characters, and the dad, and then there's like four kids, and all four kids have a different spaceship or a different aircraft. One person is on the spaceship, and then there's three different aircraft. Anyway, Thunderbird's hilarious, just freaking hilarious. Anyway, he does look like that. He does look like
A
the
little bit.
older
I didn't
son.
think of that until now, but
Oh my
but yeah,
God.
I
it
had
was
to bring that up.
'60s and it's the Thunderbirds were, so
I had to bring that up. I love the Thunderbirds, I really do, but that is just, it looks like he's doing a Thunderbirds cosplay.
It really
The
freaking does.
60s.
Right
It's hilarious.
down to the
Um,
square hair and the shiny forehead. It just, I'm sorry, but I'm expecting to see strings. I'm so sorry, but I couldn't resist that one. I'm definitely never going to. Well, not that I would want to, but I'm never going to be able to think of TOS in any other way but a cheap incarnation of the Thunderbirds now.
well, it was those were the two Cochrans, and their story, how they live and die seemed to differ, from the original series, because he would have never Zephram Cochrane never died. He was lost in space. Copyright.
No
yeah,
pun
because
intended.
he went off to places unknown until Kirk and company found him. But someone else that was notably absent in this episode, Porthos. There's no
Porthos!
Porthos in the episode.
Baby.
Oh, the gorgeous pup. I love Porthos, I really do. Although I'm very glad that Porthos wasn't in this episode, because knowing him, he'd probably go charging in, trying to attack the Borg, and he'd have got assimilated.
Point.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm really glad that Porthos was kept out of this. Because I love that pup, I really do. I can honestly say that's the only part of the Kelvin timeline that I don't like, and that is Scotty saying that he lost Captain Archer's prize beagle.
But he didn't say it by name because maybe Archer kept after Porthos. He kept on getting beagle after
Oh
beagle
yeah,
after beagle, so
no,
it's probably not the original.
Porthos. The dogs,
Porthos
even
won.
with medical, there's no way Porthos would be alive like that many years later. I mean, Porthos lived 100 years before Scotty's time, right? I mean, the dog couldn't be 100 years old, so it would have
No,
to have been, one of
it might have
either
been one of
a great
Porthos'
number of descendants or just another
exactly
beagle.
offspring.
Actually, yeah, that is a very good point. I always forget that there's, even though it's just been mentioned, I do sometimes forget that there's a really big thingy, but the timeline gap. But the going back to Zephram Cochrane, in being brought into this episode, I'm very surprised that, how can I put this? I'm actually quite surprised that it wasn't meant, because, if somebody mentions something like that in a speech, I'd like to think, but obviously there wasn't, because it wasn't heard of, or, well, it wasn't mentioned. But, somebody says that in a speech, regardless of how much of a drunkard they are, regardless of how crazy they are, surely someone's going to look into that. And there's going to be a few conspiracy theorists about. Because, if I was to hear a speech and somebody was to say something like that, I'd want to look into it. Even
Katie,
if it was only a little bit of fun, but surely there would have been chatter about it.
Well,
Kate,
the media today is totally different than what the media was thought it was going to be in the future. So
well, I'm not trying to get off subject ahead, but that reminded me of something that actually happened in real world. There was a gentleman. They call him the father of the skunk work projects of Lockheed Martin. His name was Ben Rich. Ben Rich gave a speech at, I believe, Stanford or Prince. I'm not sure, but he gave a speech in
one of the Ivy League
1992,
schools.
and you know he stated at the end of his speech, and this is, you can look this up. We have the ability to take ET home. That's what Ben
Yeah.
Rich said, the father of the Skunk Work projects and stuff and everything. Now, that happened back in 1992, and stuff. So there's like what you just said about about people wanting to look into that and everything else. A lot of people,
Yeah.
I guess, people wonder about that, but people who are in the in ufology, in UFO conspiracy and stuff and everything else,
Hmm.
they took it to heart and they looked into it and stuff, and you know they was like, oh my goodness, could this be him saying out loud without him breaking any kind of laws, you know that we have the abilities to travel interstellar space. Because he shortly, not long after that, he didn't live much into the early '90s and stuff and everything. But that was like one of his, first his final speeches and stuff that he gave and everything else. But not to get too sidetrack on this particular episode and subject. But I just wanted to
Yeah,
throw that out there that it
yeah.
has something like that has happened, and stuff. And there are people who actually dismissed it. People was like, well, then why would he say something like that? There are people who did exactly what what to Paul said, that said he was known for being a drunk. Cochran was known for being intoxicated and telling outlandish stories and stuff. Just the same as Ben Rich, gave that speech at Princeton.
True.
No, not Princeton, but
I
Stanford.
I am here to tell you, the U.S. has had extraterrestrial technology since the 40s, and if you think we haven't reversed the fuck out of that, reverse engineered it, and figured stuff out. Now, obviously, this is not something that the public is going to know about, but of course, if you've had access to this, material for, we're coming on 80 years now, you've learned to do some stuff with it, and you're not going to advertise that. We don't want Russia to know that. We don't want,
Yeah,
China or other adversaries to know that. But but spacecraft has been reported down in Russia and in other areas, and I'm sure they got their hands on their, you know, their version of it. And they reverse engineered, and tell me how the
if you
Germans were
if,
so far ahead of everything. In World War II, they were a levitating bell, really?
mm,
The Glocken or
yeah,
whatever the frick that was. I
Deglocka,
mean,
yeah.
you got they. Oh, my camera's still off. Sorry, I got up for a second and I forgot to
well,
turn it
I
back on.
figured
I just
you're away for your computer because you started getting garbled a little bit.
sorry. Well, and it's just we have technology. I mean, way beyond. This is what they publicly say. We are 20 years more advanced than anything that's visible on the market right now. So whatever aircraft, whatever anything you know about, we're 20 years ahead. That's what they publicly say. Now, what they're not saying is we're probably 100 years or better.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Yeah, that's just something too, like you would think too in this particular episode, like when you know Cochrane was probably giving that speech, the authorities probably said to him, "You might want to," because T'Pol did even say that he did retract his, claims. He just basically, oh, I just made it up and everything else. It probably if what the authorities was like, you are speaking way too much about what really happened, which we know what really happened, but yet you don't want to go on record and say it out loud without just having proof, or you just kind of want to just say you bury it and stuff and everything else. And it is one of those things where it's like, wow, they most likely buried it because the Vulcans dismissed it. Of course, T'Pol dismissed it and stuff, but Archer himself said that he remembered a speech that he gave, and he said it took a while for him to dig around in the database to find it and stuff. And it just like I said, just goes back to the whole thing of, wow, the Pogo paradox. The whole thing, to stop an event, you actually trigger the event that you're actually trying to stop. And that's what, like Tyson pointed out, like the Enterprise E, the Enterprise crew, they would have picked up and tried to, like, or destroy any of anything that would be cultural contaminants to the timeline, but they didn't. Do anybody remember was that Trials and Tribulations in Deep Space Nine, when the Defiant went back in time to meet it's K7. Enterprise, there was at station at Deep Space well, not with Deep Space, but at station K7.
K7.
And in the beginning of the episode, two people walked on to in the command center in ops. And when they got into Cisco's office and everything else, they was from temporal investigation. So you would think too, they come to understand, that if from their timeline, if you go back in time, you have to have a reason to give, if you're able to get back into your timeline, to explain why did you go back. Was it predestined that you go back, and how much interaction did you have in the past, and did you clean it up?
Well, obviously, Picard and his crew didn't. I mean, honestly, I don't blame them. I like to believe that they collectively had a ditzy moment, and
Just gotta go.
they forgot.
Tyson,
Oh, bye, Tyson. Love you.
he's muted.
You're
Take
muted,
care.
man.
Sorry, I was muted. I have to go. Thank you guys.
You're
Bye.
welcome.
Yeah.
Bye.
Take care,
I
Tyson.
was, I was flagging a spam bot that I've finally starting to figure that out on Twitch. So yay, learned something new today. But one thing going back earlier in the episode, John Billingsley's wife was in this episode.
Really?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Rooney,
I
the
want to
female
read that if I
scientist.
want to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Bonita Friedrichs. I'm probably butchering how she pronounces her last name, but that is Billingsley's real life wife.
Okay.
Mm.
Okay.
And unfortunately,
Kudos.
yeah, so that's kind of interesting thing. And of
It's,
course,
I really like that when they work with their real life family on a show. I mean, it was really good to see John Delancey and his son on Q2, like real life father and son. And then, even though that they never came into contact on the actual show, John Billingsley and his wife, and somebody else as well. There's been a few throughout Star Trek where, like, family members or spouses have worked together. Obviously, there was Bashir and Kira. That they were real life
You're missing
togetherness.
one. In TNG, the Inner Light,
oh yeah,
Picard's
Patrick Stewart's son. Yeah.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
played his son in Inner Light.
yeah. But like I said, there have been a few instances where, like, family members like sons, daughters, siblings, parents, and then spouses, have appeared together on screen. And I like it when that happens because it's just, I don't know, I just really like it. It's sweet.
There is I forgot his name is Westmore.
Michael
He
Westmore.
was Michael Westmore. He was the makeup artist for TNG.
Mhm.
His daughter, Mackenzie Westmore, she was in one episode of TNG in the first season. I can't remember what that episode was, but I know she was in Voyager in this is gonna stop my mind, but she was in Voyager, and she played a lieutenant at Khan, and it was in the second. It was in a fifth season called Warhead. Yes, the fifth season called Warhead. I remember that, and she was the lieutenant at Khan, and that was that's another, like, not saying Michael Westmore was behind the scenes. He was the makeup artist and stuff.
Yeah.
But yet, we know that there are people who, family members, as we all just stated, that were part of, characters that we've seen throughout, Star Trek franchise. I mean, heck, what's his name? I'm trying not to butcher his name. Walter Koenig. His
Mhm.
son was in Deep Space Nine in
Yep.
the first
Not
season.
not long before he unfortunately passed away. That's a sad story. But I just want to point out K70's little note that's like, I didn't realize you were the man behind that fan series, man. So I'm definitely gonna have to get a watch of the Star Trek Defiant here eventually, one of these days, if I have enough hours in the day. Which, if I lived on Bajor, I still would not be able to do all the stuff I want to do.
A comment here from Sir Jeff. Majel Barrett,
Uh,
who's she married to?
the only part she had in Voyager was the computer voice.
No, but who was she married to? She was married to somebody important on the show, wasn't she?
Gene Roddenberry, the creator.
Yes, I thought it was. Yes, so that is a really major connection to Star Trek. I mean, she's married to the create. She was married to the creator, and she was in TNG, DS9, and she was the computer voice on Voyager.
And
And she
the
was also in
Federation ships
TOS.
on the computer voice and all the Federation ships, Next Gen, DS9, Voyager, and she was actually the computer voice in the Star Trek 2009 movie before she passed away.
And she didn't. Who did she play in TOS?
Nurse Chapel.
Chapel.
Nurse Chapel. That's the one. Yeah, I could never remember who she was in TOS. But yeah, so she's had a long-standing career in Star Trek, and she was married to the creator, and so I do like it when they kind of keep it in the family. It's more of a family show then, quite literally. But no, anyway, but back to the episode.
Yeah, back to the episode because we got about 25 minutes left before we have to call it.
One thing that I really loved is, now I can only remember one thing offhand, but one thing that I love about Enterprise is that they still say things that we say now. Whereas in other Trek, a lot of phrases and things aren't really recognized because, people have kind of like grown out of them.
Mhm.
And like because time's passed. And one thing that I really love in Enterprise is when they say common phrases that we still use today. And I absolutely loved it when Trip turned around and says, "This is just lit up like a Christmas tree." Because I don't think I can't remember hearing that in any of the other Trek series. Or if it has been said, it's very rarely. But the way he said it, it was very natural. And I like that about Enterprise, because that they still use like common phrases that we use today, so it kind of links in a little bit better to bring it closer to now. Um, and I and you see, there was something that I wanted to point out, and I mean, you all know I'm not very technically minded. I'm not. I'm more for the psychology side of things when it comes to dissecting the episodes. But what's his name? Reed Malcolm. That's it. When he was doing the pew pew things with the phaser to ramp up the phenomenon. Yes, that's the one. Thank you. You see, I use such technical language; it's hard to understand.
Well, pew pew is a good description because
Well, yeah, at least everybody knows what I mean. It's very technical, though.
I would have said phaser. I would have said phaser modification.
Yeah, but that's because you are a lot more sophisticated than me when it comes to technical jargon. I am. You see, like I said, I'm more for the psychology side of it. I will leave you to be Rain Man. But no, and I love you for that. I really do. But no, when he was doing that and like amping up the power, I couldn't quite understand what he was testing. Like what was the phaser shooting at? I was that's the only thing I was a little confused about, is what was he using to test the phaser? I understand why he was testing it, but what, because it was saying something about the alloy, and I mean, was it a piece of Borg tech that was got?
I think it's just a piece of titanium or whatever alloy that they had available. See, I didn't make a note of it.
And I'm just speculating on this, and you raised a good question right there, and this is just a speculation that he was testing he was testing like just a material that was part of the transport that they was using in this episode. And he was just using it to see if it will go through like a bulkhead, a piece of a bulkhead, just to see whether or not it will penetrate, or will not even do anything to the bulkhead and stuff and everything, because I guess the output of the phaser was preset and stuff. So when they was doing some you know phase pistol modification and stuff and everything, they was testing the output power of the weapon to see whether or not it will be effective against the modified, I guess, transport.
The thing is, though, they were testing out phase pistols, not the ship's phasers. And I mean,
that's why I say the bulkheads, because the bulkheads are in the ship.
Yeah, I understand that. However, with them testing out like the phaser rifles, obviously they'd have done it with the phase pistols as well. But from the point I understood it was that they were testing to see what would be effective against the drones themselves. But now all of that I understand, but what I was wondering is the target that they were using, because this is the only thing I was unclear on about that whole scene. The target they were using, was it just a random piece of alloy, or was it actually from the Borg vessel?
No, I think it was something off of the ship. It's off the Enterprise.
Yeah, I think it was like duratanium, some sort of duratanium plating, something like that. I believe it's just a random duratanium plating.
Yeah, because that's the only thing that confused me about it, is if they were testing what setting the phase pistols needed to be amped up to.
Well, at least they weren't doing it in engineering.
Well, yeah, I mean, Data and Jordy could learn from off them.
I mean, by the time the 24th century, they could erect a force field around, different things and stuff. But, yeah, a good thing they didn't do it around engineering and stuff.
Just one thing that I want to bring up, because I know that we're going to be going off air in the next like 20 minutes. But one thing that I do want to bring up, and I want your opinions on this. When the name of alien species I've forgotten were assimilated.
Aliens?
Pardon?
You talking about the two Tarkalians that came aboard Enterprise?
The Tarkalians, thank you. Right. They
Which,
were
that's
injected with nanopropes.
the first time we actually saw them in person.
Yes.
But they were injected with nanoprobes. Now we kind of like saw this in First Contact when one of the officers had been injected with nanoprobes, and you saw the black veiny things taking over, and he asked Captain Picard for help, so Picard killed him. Best help he could have got, in my opinion. But these Tarkalians and Dr. Phlox himself, the nanoprobes did not overtake them like they should have done. Because I've never known someone to be like the first process of assimilation. Obviously they're injected with the nanoprobes. The nanoprobes start taking over their system, but they were unconscious, that they had been riddled with nanoprobes for a while, and yet when they came around in sickbay, the guy Tarkalian, he was fully aware in himself, but then all of a sudden he changed. It didn't seem like a degeneration. And then Dr. Phlox, he's, yeah, fair enough, he had the call of the collective and stuff, but it just seemed very far-fetched that somebody could last that long after the first process of assimilation, especially when they started to hear the call of the collective. Or was it slowed down because they were kind of cut off from the collective and they kind of like made their own little collective? I'm not sure. I just find it very confusing.
One thing that I took away, that it seemed, because Phlox said it by himself, and you asked a really good question about how the fast nature of assimilation when it comes to getting injected with nanoprobes. It took the process of being fully assimilated. It's almost like matter of, I guess, seconds or less than a minute. But when it comes to, we seen these in this particular scene where the two male and female Tarkalians, it took a while for the assimilation process to really hit home, and they really became integrated. And then we seen Phlox and stuff. I'm wondering if it's because of the nanoprobes themselves, you know, had to take time. I remember that there was a seven made a she made a note of it in Star Trek Picard in season 3, that when it takes a little while for people to get fully assimilated, in a sense, because they got to get injected by heavy metal alloys, which she explained was a lithium ion, to help stabilize the individual to be assimilated, you know, assimilate with the nanoprobes and stuff and everything else. So you could say that I think the simulation process is almost, it can work faster for some, and some others it takes, the process is a little slower. It doesn't work quite quickly, you know, on some for certain reason. You could basically say, uh, it's it, 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 it's almost something like some sort of pre. I can't even remember. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's something that has to do with just in the sense of, I guess, one's biology. I would say,
Hmm.
somebody have a different physiology and stuff and everything else could be easily assimilated than another, like you and me, Dave or Katie. One of us can be assimilated quickly than the other. It doesn't all work probably the same way and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, yeah,
The, the
case in point, yeah, denobulans. I mean, their body is slow to adapt to the assimilation
yes,
process.
exactly. And it
Actually,
take
yeah, yeah,
it's
good point. Yeah, I get that. I was just, I think it's because of just how my mindset is tonight, and I really struggled comprehending a few things, which usually I'm quite good at, but I really am struggling tonight. I think I'm just struggling to brain and form words again.
Well, it's a good thing we got about a little over 10 minutes left. So,
But in all, when it comes to this particular episode, you
mhm.
know, I really, it really, we talked about it before. I really enjoy the fact that they really, went to when the writers, I guess, was brainstorming and they came up with, a suggestion about this episode. It's like, you know, how can we, how can we tie, an episode into something from the future? Because we know it's the same that it exists in the same time, not same timeline, but they exist in the same world and stuff and everything, but different points along the time and stuff and everything. But it was interesting to see that they actually bought the Borg into this episode, into, I guess, uh into this season, because this season took place, as Katie pointed out earlier, that it happened, and it was literally the beginning of Trek. If you go by continuity and stuff and everything, it started in Trek and everything else and stuff. Like they literally was going out to explore the unknown and stuff and everything else, and
Oh
they did a really interesting job at you know wow. So they didn't really destroyed everything and they left stuff behind. We can all talk about that, but it really brought into perspective too. And one thing that really got me, that really made me even think about this too, because if y'all remember when 7 and 9 parents were assimilated and the episode was at Dark Frontier,
Mhm.
yeah.
uh you remember they went out and they was looking for the Borg. They even used the word the Borg, and this was way before the Enterprise D was even, it was still under construction, but it was before, Picard's now time and stuff. And they used the word Borg. If I'm not mistaken, did they use the word Borg in?
Yes, they
They didn't
did.
use the word, did they? Okay.
Not in this
Well,
episode. No.
no,
Oh no, no,
not
it's
in this,
not
not in
Frontier.
this
They knew
episode. But I'm talking about
of
Dark
what.
Frontier. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Starfleet was aware of the Borg, and this reaffirms my uh suspicion. Oh, so this is how 7 and 9 parents find out about the Borg.
Yeah, I think that they did have information. I think that they got the information from Zephyr and Cochrane. Because I actually think that like after they like this encounter in Regeneration, Starfleet started like looking into things a bit more. But I think that they started their search because of information from Zephyr and Cochrane, and like maybe gathered it over the years, but it had been slightly buried. And then when Starfleet started getting a little bit more, like after his death and that, they started looking into a lot of things that he'd said it under intoxication and his wild stories. And I do think that he may have actually mentioned them to someone by name, and that it was buried by Starfleet, and somehow, I mean, especially with them being scientists, maybe the Hansons uncovered this like redacted file, and that's how they found out, and that's why they went in search of them. But there is one thing that I want to bring up quickly. Now, I don't usually notice stuff like this, but do you know when the Borg got onto the Enterprise? After they disabled it, and you saw the scene where like I don't know if it was like turbo lift doors opened and a security team came out. None of the security team had pips on their uniform. None at all.
They could have been enlisted personnel. They could have just been enlisted person.
I thought that security teams, I thought that the only like non-Starfleet people that were like security on the Enterprise was the what were they called? That team that joined them. Yeah, the Mako team. I thought they were the only ones that weren't actually Starfleet, but I thought that like security officers, because like in all the other Star Treks, all the security officers have at least one pip or some form of rank. But in this episode, that security team, not one of them, because in Enterprise they have their pips across there, don't they? On their uniform above one of the coloured lines, and they had no pips whatsoever. Their uniforms were completely plain. I don't even remember seeing the Starfleet badge or whatever it is that they have on the overalls. It was just like a plain uniform with like the red lines on it, but there was no Starfleet insignia that I saw. There were no pips at all.
You're gonna make me have to watch it again now.
I saw what you saw, Katie, and simply put it, they were just non-commissioned officer. I mean, not officer. They were non-commissioned. They were non-commissioned means that they didn't go to the academy. They didn't go to the academy.
I didn't know that was an option. I actually didn't know that was an option. So, like, forgive me. I just thought that was really weird because I don't ever remember, apart from the Mako team, I don't ever remember seeing any episode of Trek like TNG and all that. I mean, apart from Odo's team on DS9, because a lot of them were Bajoran, but even the Starfleet officers that were in his team, they had some form of rank, and they still had like the actual proper uniforms and the badges and stuff. But there were just plain overalls. There was no Starfleet insignia. There was no pips or anything, and I found that strange that they didn't even have the Starfleet badges on the uniforms. The overalls were just plain, apart from the red whatchamagoos.
They have any of the Enterprise, the NX patches on their arms or anything?
No, they were literally, apart from the red lines. Apart from the red lines, that was, other than that, their uniform was completely plain, and I thought that even if they didn't go to the academy, they would still have some form of Starfleet insignia because they were working for Starfleet.
See what you say, yeah.
That's what I found strange. Now I didn't know that you didn't have to go to the academy to be a security officer on a starship. I'm not that technical, but maybe back then you didn't. But it
doesn't have to be
the Starfleet insignia that I found was strange.
it doesn't have to be with just security, but like any of the departments can have non-commissioned personnel. You know, you spend at least a 2 year at a training facility or something like that. You know, anytime you go to the academies, it means you're looking to be a commissioned officer. And non-commissioned officer, because Starfleet Academy requires a 4 year, training course, where non-Starfleet personnel requires a 2 year course. And you can be anything in engineering, medical, um, uh,
Anything
security,
pretty much.
just about
Engineering.
anything and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
But
mean, that explains the rank, but it doesn't explain the lack of Starfleet advertisement, so to speak. I just find that a little bit weird.
we
They were basically, they was just like, non-speaking personnel who didn't deserve to have the flashy stuff around on their costumes and stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
we don't have a lot of time left. I just wanted to make a point that usually Archer's the one that wants to go in guns blazing, and DePaul's the one that has to kind of
Yes.
hone him back. The two of them kind of did a role reversal. When trying to negotiate with the drones, Archer wanted to establish a dialogue, and DePaul's like, we need to destroy them. So
Yeah.
see
That
that's
was
like
surprising.
a really good role reversal. That's one of the
Hmm.
big notes that I put in here.
Oh,
I want to make a
absolutely. I
point of
thought
get.
Mm.
I I thought the same thing too. I was like, to Paul was like, she was kind of be like, look, what if you can't save him? And he said, I
Yeah,
want to try to take them home and stuff. And it's like it's admirable and everything else, but like, she was like, you don't have to destroy the ship,
yeah,
you know.
and how distraught Archer was when he had to open up the hatch to ditch the
Yeah,
Tarkalians when they were fiddling with things they're not supposed to, and he just like it just the look on his face, you could just feel his pain when he had to do that.
Mhm.
definitely.
Yeah, 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 absolutely,
Although, very
absolutely.
quickly, in response to this role reversal thing, when Archer wanted to open a dialogue and T'Pol was just like, kill him, she probably saw the logic in killing him. She would have seen the risk, and logically,
The
it
needs of the
wasn't worth
many.
exactly, and I think that's where she was coming from. But it was nice to see, a Vulcan just say, kill them. Don't talk, kill them. And I do like that. I do like that because that was very Klingon of her. Just kill them.
Kill them all.
Exactly. Yeah. 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 It takes me back to that episode. But no, I mean, with us having to go off air in a minute, my closing thoughts for today's episode are: be careful what you tamper with. If they hadn't have gone in search of that debris, that might never have happened. Um,
That's kind of
so
like the
it
first,
is
like,
one of
I
those
think we
things.
found it. It's like, wow, you got all this debris. You think you found it?
Well, yeah, but it not everything is meant to be unearthed. And as much as, especially Star Trek nerds, I mean, honestly, as much as humans have a natural curiosity to know everything and to know as much as possible, sometimes some things are better left unknown. And there have been times in our history, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but there are times in our history when we have learned that lesson the hard way. And just think before you delve into things.
Do you have any closing thoughts, Travis?
It's just what Katie was saying. Exercise caution above
Mm.
all else and stuff and everything else. Just real quick, our curiosity as human beings. We get curious about the unknown and stuff and everything. Just like one of the scientists on there, he urged caution. He urged caution to the
Yeah.
supervisor, and the supervisor said, and stuff. But he started looking into it like, yeah, this is a little weird for him. He was
Mm.
like, he was just like, we gotta let's be cautious about it and stuff. And just going on what Katie said, sometimes
Therefore, will
our
bite you in the
curiosity gets the best
ass.
of us. Yeah.
And say
Exactly.
so really quick before we wrap up, as you both know, and a lot of our viewers may or may not know, next month's going to be my 1 year since I stopped drinking alcohol.
Well,
It's just a,
congratulations,
yeah,
Dave.
less
Yeah.
than 3 weeks away till I get that 1 year chip. So I thought it's only fitting for the month of May that the episodes that we focus on deals with various forms of addiction. And so the first episode we're going to hit season 1 of Next Generation, Symbiosis, which Merritt Buttrick, who played Kirk's son in Star Trek 2 and Star Trek 3, so I think it's great that actors are able to get other roles in other series or even the same series for that matter. So he's one of the many individuals that god dang it, it's getting all teary-eyed. Yeah. Unfortunately, about a year after this episode aired, he passed away from AIDS. I didn't even know he was gay. Same, but yeah, he was part of the AIDS epidemic back in the 80s.
Ladies. Mm.
Yeah, but saying so we're going to start off with that. Then we're going to hit another good Enterprise episode. I had it written down. Oh, what was it called? Damage. When T'Pol is dealing with Trillium D while going
Mm.
while
Yeah.
going through the Expanse or the Expanse hunting for the Xindi and
The
all
Delphic
that.
expanse. Yeah.
Yeah, Delphic Expanse, yeah. And I'm not sure if we're going to do a show on Memorial Day Monday yet. I'm gonna say I don't well I'll say Katie, it's not a holiday for you guys, but it's the big holiday here for us. It's like the kickoff for summer for us Americans. But at least the week before, I think Hippocratic Oath will be a good DS9 episode to talk about when the Jem'Hadar are going through withdrawal symptoms from the white.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yep.
yeah, saying
Yeah.
Bashir's trying to cure it and
Mhm.
saying, but I think if we do a Memorial Day episode, I might kind of do a rounded episode with Raffi's addiction to alcohol and drugs. So not focus on a specific episode because it was a pretty big arc for her as a character. So I think that might be a good way
Mm.
of rounding off the month if we decide to do episode on that Monday.
Okay. Okay. And
Yeah.
to well, real quick, Dave, you said that I think in England that they have something called Remembrance Day. If that's correct, Katie, I have
Remembrance
remember
Day. Remembrance Day. That's in November.
Oh
in
yeah,
November.
that's their version of Veterans Day.
Yeah. 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 Something
But
because they do celebrate something like for us for the veteran because it's called Memorial Day is basically marking the end. They could say I don't know if the end of World War II,
mhm.
but it was just something in the sense to say thank you to the veterans and stuff.
Yeah, for us it's Remembrance Sunday, and a lot of people wear red poppies, and it's in honor of all fallen veterans.
Good old
I like
suitor.
him. I love that guy. Although I preferred him in Lord of the Rings. Or was it The
Yeah.
Hobbit? No, Lord of the Rings.
Mm. Well, The Hobbit is part of the Lord of the Rings, so But yeah,
Well,
thanks, Jeff. Like I said, yeah, that's going to be the 19th. That's going to be an emotional day for me because that's just right at my 1 year mark. So,
Okay. Okay.
but yeah, I got to hit the head before I head out the door. So until next week, may Spock be with y'all.